This is exactly the type of a crash that takes out more motorcycle riders than anything else. And unfortunately, most riders have no idea how to react to it properly. There is, however, one move that can save you in this situation, if you practice it beforehand. Every day riders around the world face this exact scenario. You're going straight and a car suddenly turns left in front of you. It happens fast and it's frighteningly common. Statistically, 43% of all fatal motorcycle collisions with another vehicle happen exactly like this. Most riders either freeze, try to panic swerve, or grab a handful of brake, which makes things worse. In this video, we'll break down why this crash is so dangerous, what we can actually do to minimize the risk, and how to respond correctly if it happens to you. This is the same technique taught in advanced riding courses, including our King of the Road course, and by the end of this video, you'll not only know what to do in theory, but also how to train it until it becomes muscle memory. So your skills kick in when it matters most, instead of you just freezing up and helplessly watching yourself crash into a car. This type of collision happens so often because drivers make a turn without actually seeing the oncoming bike. Distracted drivers don't even notice fire trucks and ambulances coming straight at them with sirens on, so it is no surprise that a motorcycle, which is smaller, thinner and often faster, is completely ignored, especially when it's moving quicker than expected, which, let's be honest, is not that uncommon. Roads and vehicles became so mundane and familiar that many drivers don't even consider them dangerous anymore. They let their guard down. They are looking at their phones or start fiddling with the 21-inch TV set in the center console. Anything but paying attention to what's actually happening ahead. And there is another problem. This type of a crash is becoming even more dangerous than before, because the average vehicle is now taller than it used to be. Pickup trucks, SUVs, crossovers, they all are pretty high vehicles. So if we do end up hitting one, there is a much greater chance we'll go head first into the side of the vehicle rather than tumbling over the hood. Which, don't get me wrong, would still hurt, but it is miles better than getting smashed directly into a vehicle head first. That difference often leads to far more severe impacts and worse injuries. So our first line of defense should be making ourselves as visible as possible. High visibility gear, a bright helmet and extra lights on the bike can all help reduce the chance of being overlooked. It is not 100% foolproof, but it is a start. Another major thing is our speed. Motorcycles often travel much faster than most drivers expect. A car driver might glance ahead, spot a bike in the distance and assume they have plenty of time to complete the turn, when in reality the bike arrives much faster than they anticipated. So a great habit to develop is this. When approaching intersections where a car could potentially turn across our path, roll off the throttle and slow down a bit. That small adjustment gives both the rider and the driver more time to react. Being more visible and reducing speed before intersections helps prevent a lot of these situations. But what if, despite all that, the car still turns in front of you? What should you do now? Some riders rely on their horn, or a good old rev bomb, to grab the driver's attention. That might work sometimes, but more often it doesn't. Let's be real, if the driver is already pulling out in front of us, we can pretty safely assume that their situational awareness is not that great in the first place. So expecting them to suddenly hear our horn, notice us and react accordingly is a bit too optimistic, to say the least. More likely, they'll continue being an idiot and only snap out of it after the collision has already happened. Honking or flashing the high beam can be useful before a driver begins their turn, but once they're already moving into our path, it is too late. At that point, honking is just a waste of time. Even if they do hear us, most drivers will either take too long to respond or just freeze up entirely. And if they do react, there is no guarantee they'll do something helpful. Some will slam the brakes and block our path completely, others will try to gun it and get out of the way. It is impossible to predict what exactly they'll do. There are a ton of crash videos here on YouTube where we can see it. People honk, rev and then crash anyway. So if that doesn't work, what does? How about swerving around the car? Swerving is a very useful riding technique. We use it all the time to avoid obstacles on the road, like potholes, debris, surprise gravel and sand patches. So it's easy to assume it would work just as well for dodging a car that turns in front of us. But here is the catch. A pothole doesn't move. A car, on the other hand, very much does. And as we've already discussed, it is not very predictable. Let's say we see a car pulling out across our path, just like in this clip. Is it going to keep moving forward? Or is it going to suddenly stop? And where exactly? Will it stop here, halfway into our lane, or after blocking it completely, or almost after it clears it? We just don't know. If we commit to a swerve too early, we are essentially making a guess. If we are trying to swerve behind the car and it suddenly stops, we will either hit it or veer into oncoming traffic and hit that instead. If we assume that car will stop and try to swerve in front of the car, the driver might keep moving, and once again we hit it. Either way, we are gambling here. Which is why swerving alone usually isn't the best solution in this type of situation. It completely relies on predicting what the other person will do, and that's not something we usually want to bet our safety on. So, what should we do? Actually, swerving was the right idea, but only if we don't commit to it too early. As strange as it might sound, we have to wait. The idea is simple. When we see a car turning in front of us, we don't immediately try to dodge it, but instead brake hard first and slow down as much as possible. Braking buys us time and gives us a chance to see what the car is actually doing. Only after that do we choose whether to go left or right. With this approach, even if we still end up hitting the car, braking will reduce the impact a lot. Hitting a car at 30 km/h is a whole lot better than doing it at 60. And by scrubbing off that speed early, we'll have a much better chance of spotting a clear escape path and swerving around safely. We're not just guessing anymore. As we are braking, we are watching what the car does, and based on that, we decide how and where to swerve. That's why this is the go-to maneuver taught in just about every advanced riding school. And it's also one of the most important techniques in our King of the Road course. We dedicate a full week to building this skill step by step, with drills and exercises that make it part of our muscle memory. Because, like the old saying goes, in an emergency, we won't rise to the occasion, we'll fall back to our training. So, let's do some training. This maneuver might save your life, but only if you train it right. So, here is how to break it down into steps we can actually practice. To build the brake and swerve maneuver, we start with the most important part – braking. Stopping the motorcycle quickly comes down to one thing – how well we can use our front brake. That's where almost all of our stopping power comes from. When we brake, the bike's weight shifts forward. The harder we brake, the more weight is put onto the front wheel, and the more traction it gets. That added traction lets us apply even more braking force, which slows the bike down faster. On a modern bike, aggressive braking can shift up to 95 or even 100% of the bike's weight onto the front wheel. But this weight doesn't just instantaneously move forward, it gradually increases as we brake more and more. Because of that, we don't just grab the front brake with full force at once. Instead, we use progressive braking, a smooth increasing squeeze of the brake lever that ramps up as the front tire loads up. When you build the necessary muscle memory by practicing your braking technique, you'll be amazed how fast and reliable your bike can actually stop. And what about the rear brake? Interestingly, it can get a bit tricky in case of quick braking. How we use it might not be so obvious. Here is what happens. As we are braking and more weight shifts forward onto the front tire, the rear one becomes lighter. And a light rear tire is really easy to lock up. At first glance, locking the rear might not seem like a big deal. It just skids, right? That's correct, but only as long as the bike is braking perfectly straight. In real conditions, a rear wheel skid can be way more dangerous than it looks. If the rear slides sideways and then we release the brake too fast, the rear tire will suddenly regain grip, snapping the bike upright and launching us into a high side. To prevent this, with rear brake we should do something very counterintuitive. After we initially apply it in the beginning of our braking, then we have to gradually release it as weight moves off the back tire and we increase the pressure on the front brake. That way, we avoid locking it up as it unloads. On shorter bikes like sport bikes or supermotors, we might even let go of the rear brake completely after the initial input, because at this point the rear wheel starts to lift off anyway. On longer bikes, rear brake still might be relevant a little bit, but only a very little pressure should remain. All this is pretty counterintuitive, so if you're just starting to learn emergency braking, it is usually better to forget about the rear brake for the time being, especially if the bike is not equipped with ABS. Focus all your attention on mastering the front brake. You'll still get the vast majority of your stopping power and you'll avoid the biggest risks that come with rear brake mistakes. And only once you're 100% confident with your front brake technique, you can start adding the rear, using the technique we just discussed. Of course, if your bike is equipped with ABS, you might start practicing with the rear brake right away, because the electronics will prevent you from locking up the rear wheel even if you press the brake too hard. Once you've gotten comfortable with aggressive braking, you can start layering in other skills, like downshifting. As we finish braking and prepare to swerve, our speed will drop significantly. Ideally, by the time we are ready to turn, we should already be in a lower gear, ready to accelerate if needed. So, once the braking part starts to feel automatic, start adding downshift into your practice. It is not your primary task, which is still slowing down fast, but it's a useful habit to build. And now let's finally introduce the swerve. It is done with counter steering. If you've seen my video on counter steering, you probably already know the drill. To lean the bike and make it change its course, you temporarily turn the handlebars into the opposite direction of where you want to lean. Hence the name counter steering. If we want to swerve to the left, we push the left handlebar, the bike temporarily loses its balance and tips left. After that, to return the bike back into its lane, we push the right handlebar and it tips back to the right. And to make a right-hand swerve, we do the opposite. Push the right handlebar to lean right and then push the left one to return the bike back into its lane. So here is how the whole process looks like. As we finish the braking phase, we pick our escape line, left or right. We turn our head and look where we want to go. We release the brake, then push the handlebar to initiate the lean and swerve. Once clear, we push the handlebars into the opposite direction to bring the bike upright and return to our lane. With practice, you'll get to the point where you can start to blend the braking and the swerving phases, releasing the brake at the same time as you begin your counter-steering input. This saves you precious time and makes the maneuver more fluid. In the end, your brake and swerve should look somewhat like this: a hard, aggressive braking followed by two quick counter-steering inputs. If you can do that smoothly and consistently, you deserve a round of applause. You've just learned one of the most important life-saving skills a street rider can have, and you've dramatically reduced your chances of ending up on somebody's windshield. Great success! I know I kind of just touched on the counter-steering without really explaining how it works, but that's only because I already have a full video dedicated to it. Why do we have to turn the handlebars into the opposite direction? How does that actually steer the bike? And why is there so much confusion around something so fundamental to motorcycle riding? If you want to know more about any of that, this video here will clear it up completely. It's all about how countersteering really works and why it is the key to controlling our bike at any speed. And that's about it for today. As usual, thank you for watching, have a wonderful day and ride safely. Bye!